So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this very important and very interesting session. So happy to have you with us, Padma. Thank you so much for picking up this topic, because I think it never goes out of fashion, right? And it's useful to everyone, not just comms managers. So very important topic, and I think we really need to talk more about it just because of the sheer variety of situations that come up. Though there's a lot of material, I think however long you've been a manager, sometimes you're surprised by new situations that come up, right? You think you've got it figured out, but then something else, unsettles you. So very important topic. And Padma will introduce herself, but I'd really like to, thank her. She's a person who's very inspiring from the conversations I've had with her before. So I personally am really looking forward to this session myself too. And thanks a lot, Sharath, who's been helping us set up these sessions. All of this is running smoothly, largely because of him. So over to you, Padma.
Thank you so much, Asha, for the great introduction. And I hope I do justice to the session. And like you said, there's a lot that we can cover in this topic. So I really had to pick out the ones that I really want to talk about. And since this is a group of aspiring managers or managers, I've only taken sessions or only talk, or I'm only going to talk which managers may be facing on a more often than not, right? So that's how the session is tailored. Before I start, just wanted to let everyone know that, I will take questions at the end of the session, but I'd really like to make this session interactive. And I will be asking a couple of questions here and there as I present, and I would really appreciate it if you all could send in your answers in chat. That'll help me get the vibe of the audience here, and also I'll be sure that we are wide and awake and ready to go this beautiful Friday morning. So please humor me and do drop in answers in chat when I ask some questions. Sorry? Somebody had to say something? Okay. All right, so please send in your answers in chat, and I hope that, I'll be able to answer all questions and live up to, Asha, your expectation, since you are looking forward so much to this session. All right, so I'll start with a quick introduction to myself. I've been in the writing and communications field for more than 20 years now. I started my career in the print media as a journalist in the Times of India, and then I joined the corporate world with Google. And I became a technical documentation manager when I was working at Cisco, and now I'm with NetApp, and I manage the knowledge programs team here, which is part of NetApp's customer support and delivery organization. In my free time, I love playing badminton, and I'm an avid reader, and I also love traveling and seeing new places. Okay, so I wanted to start this session with a little bit of Dilbert humor. I really like Dilbert cartoons and their take on office situations. So when I was doing my research on this topic, I came across this comic strip, which I found quite amusing because it closely kind of relates to what I'm presenting today. Here we have Dilbert's pet dog Bert giving a seminar on difficult co-workers, not on difficult conversations, but difficult co-workers. And according to dog Bert, the best way to handle difficult co-workers is to quit your job and become a syndicated cartoonist. I really hope I have better takeaways for you in my presentation today. And with that, the agenda of today's session. Today, we'll look at the what, the why, and the how of difficult conversations. We'll try and understand what we mean by difficult conversations. We'll try and define them based on some examples. We'll dive into why these conversations are difficult, and we'll look at some tips on how to handle these conversations effectively. Okay, so what are difficult conversations? Can you all just type in what you think are some examples of difficult conversations? And when you're thinking of difficult conversations, you might want to think of conversations that you've avoided, or you've postponed, or you've had and regretted having because they didn't go as expected. So conflict. Conflict is one. Disagreements, yes. Anything else? Anyone else? Explain why you give poor rating to employees. Yeah, low performance or performance issues. Yeah. Right, and appraisals. Yeah. Harassment at workplace, layoffs related to money. Yeah. Thank you so much for biased opinions. Yes. Thank you so much for adding your inputs to chat. And I have some jotted in, and some of them that you've already mentioned in chat. So difficult conversations can be any of the following, right? This is not an exhaustive list, but this is good enough to get started on this discussion and take us through this conversation, through this session. Now, difficult conversations can be any of the following, right? You may have to deal with performance issues where you need to manage a low performer in your team. It could be lack of accountability where some team members are not probably proactively following up with project deliverables. You may have to deal with some attitude issues where there are team members who may be, high performers, but they're not team players. There may be difficult personalities in your team, right? Some people who are
Is everyone able to hear Padma?
No, I was wondering the same. Yeah.
I think we have lost you here.
Hey, I'll reach out to Padma and see what's going on.
Let's just wait for a minute till he comes back.
Sharath, I was having a similar issue that Padma had and then kind of left the meeting and rejoined using the WebEx app and giving the password. So now everything is clear. So maybe that Padma should try that also.
I'll request that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
interested. So we may see a latecomer as a person who's not interested or motivated to give them.
Padma, sorry to interrupt. We lost you for the last 2 minutes.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Yeah, the previous couple of slides. If you could go back.
Oh, sorry about that. Where did you lose me? Can you tell me?
Yeah, you were here. You were here.
Did I complete the slide?
No, we didn't hear till the end.
Okay, all right. I don't know where I was in the slides. I was telling that these are some examples of difficult conversations. And if based on these examples, if we were to define difficult conversations, then they would be conversations that are usually about some sensitive topic, where we believe that there's certain risk associated with broaching these topics because the discussion may not go as expected. And these conversations have the propensity to lead to conflict because they may trigger adverse reactions in the other person. And, there's a high chance that you might end up spoiling a relationship with the person if you don't handle these conversations effectively. All right. So I was then asking, that's why probably I didn't hear any response. Am I still audible? Am I coming through or?
Yes, it's good now.
Very well.
Okay. So why are these conversations difficult? I'd asked the question. I was hoping somebody will answer in chat, but probably I was not, I had gotten cut off and so nobody heard that question. Do you think these conversations are difficult? And these conversations are difficult because there are emotions and feelings involved in these conversations. These conversations trigger strong emotions and feelings, and that's why these conversations are usually very difficult. And why do these conversations trigger emotions? these conversations trigger emotions because we have these conversations when we see certain behaviors that we don't approve of, right? And that happens when we perceive something we value is at stake. For instance, if punctuality is one of your core values, then a team member who is consistently late for team meetings may trigger negative emotions in you, right? And once these negative emotions are triggered, we assign certain perceptions and interpretations to these behaviors when they don't align with our value system. So we may see a latecomer as a person who's not interested or motivated in giving their best at work. We are also not very skilled at communicating when our emotions are high, and that is what makes these conversations even more difficult. And our tendency then is to avoid these conversations. We tend to avoid them because we are reluctant to raise sensitive issues. We fear we will be criticized, or we fear that we will be judged. We also feel that raising these conversations may somehow affect our self-image, our internal identity, or may affect how others see us, right? Our external identities. We also fear, how the conversation will go, what will be the outcome of the conversation. So we fear the future after the conversation. We worry what, whether we'll make the situation worse, or whether it will affect our relationship with the concerned person. So those are the fears that, make us avoid these conversations, or we feel that we should avoid these conversations. But avoidance is a poor strategy in this situation, because when you're facing certain behaviors, or when you are upset with certain behaviors, and if you don't address them, either it is something that you're personally experiencing or the team is experiencing, it creates a toxic team environment that could actually lead to a host of other problems. So let us take a closer look at why we need to have these conversations. Now, a survey in the US of US workforce to understand the impact of communication in defining workplace culture. More than 1,000 employees from different companies were participated in this survey, and these are some of the survey findings. According to this report, 4 in 10 employees in the US feel that their managers do not engage in honest conversations about work topics. 3 in 10 say that their managers don't encourage a culture of open and transparent communication. 1 in 5 are uncomfortable engaging in any conversation, let alone difficult conversations with their managers. 76% of people who took the survey strongly believe that it is the manager who sets the culture of their work team. And 1 in 5 have actually left their jobs due to poor workplace culture. Now, although this survey was done in the US, we need to realize that we are a global workforce. Many of us have team members in the US, or our managers are working out of US, and therefore this survey results are valid for us as well, right? And even though the survey was conducted in 2019, these stats may still hold good, because the pandemic and the remote work environment couldn't have made these situations or conversations any better. A clear finding of the survey was that a bad culture can derail an organization, create a toxic atmosphere, and leave employees frustrated and disengaged. And a disengaged workforce is not a productive workforce. On the other hand, when we show openness in dealing with difficult situations at workplaces, we build trust within the team. It improves the team dynamics. We create an environment where the team feels that any topic can be discussed without fear of retaliation or fear of being judged. And we set the foundation for an open, honest, and non-toxic work culture. And that is why it is important that we have those crucial conversations sooner than later and not avoid them. All right. Okay. Now that we've understood what difficult conversations are, why we need to have them, let us look at the best practices that will ensure optimal outcomes for these conversations. In my opinion, there are 3 best practices that we need to keep in mind while preparing for difficult conversations. First, we need to really evaluate if the conversation is necessary. We then have to challenge our assumptions, our preconceived notions, which might actually stop us from approaching these conversations objectively. And when we are approaching these conversations, we need to approach them with a positive intent and a growth mindset. We'll go through each of these best practices in detail in the subsequent slides. All right. So the first best practice to evaluate is this conversation actually necessary? For that, we need to take some time and think about the issue, right? We need to think about what is it that we are trying to solve through this conversation. We need to try and understand what behavior is causing concern for us or for the team in general. We need to evaluate why this is causing concern or why this is distressing us. We should also carefully assess the impact of the behavior. Is this behavior affecting us personally? Is it affecting our work? Is it affecting the business goals? Or is it affecting the larger team? We also need to, take a moment to consider whether we are overreacting to a situation because of past experiences. Are we making a mountain out of a molehill? And we should also be evaluating what could be the potential fallouts if we don't raise this issue. Is it even worth raising this issue? Can we let it pass? So these are the things we need to really. Once you determine that this issue has to be dealt with, then it is better to have it sooner than later. Next, the next important thing to keep in mind is that we have to constantly challenge our assumptions about the situation, because our assumptions may be causing us to form opinions and judgments that may hamper the outcome of the conversations. Now, all difficult conversations have three stories, all right? One is your story, one is their story, and then there is a third story, which is that of a neutral observer. It is important that we always start with the third story and try to think like a neutral observer or a mediator, and not jump into conclusions or judgments based on what we perceive from our point of view. And the best way to do that is to ask one question to ourselves. What story are we telling ourselves about the person that we are going to have this conversation with? What things do we believe is completely true about the situation, which in reality might only be partially true or maybe completely false? So it's important that we challenge our assumptions and observe the situation objectively, so that we are not jumping into conclusions and going to the conversation with emotions or opinions. It is also important to approach difficult conversations with the right intent and the right mindset. You really must be very clear about what you intend to achieve through this conversation. Are you having this conversation to prove a point? Do you want to give the other person a piece of your mind because you're really upset? Or are you going to indulge in some kind of a blame game? Or are you going to the conversation in hopes of having an open dialogue? Are you trying to understand what their point of view is, what their story is, where they are coming from? And do you intend to find a peaceful solution to the problem? So it's very important for us to identify the intent of our conversation. Before beginning a difficult conversation, we need to really think about what we are bringing to the table. Are we coming to the conversation with a fixed mindset, or are we coming to the conversation with a growth mindset? And that will determine the outcome of the conversation, whether we are approaching it like a victim or whether we are approaching it like a learner, curious to understand the other person's point of view. And when you have the right intent and a growth mindset, the chances of having a positive outcome out of this conversation is quite high. Now that we've identified whether the conversation is necessary, we've decided that we want to go ahead with the conversation, we've challenged our assumptions, and we've set the right intent and the right mindset for the conversation, let's look at some do's and some don'ts during the conversation that will increase our chances of a positive and an amicable outcome. So how do we prepare for the conversation, right? Now, such conversations really need time. Like I was telling you earlier, we need to prepare for it. We need to think about it. And then, we need to go ahead and have that conversation. So it needs preparation, and it's wise to actually schedule time on your calendars for it. It's probably not a good idea to just spring it upon that person and have that conversation. You might want to schedule time on your calendars, let the person know, what the agenda of the discussion is so that they are not caught off guard. If you have taken time to prepare for the conversation, it's only fair that you give them some heads up so that they are also prepared for the conversation. It will also help if you plan the general flow of the conversation. What is it that you want to discuss, so that you can control how the conversation will go in some way. There is no guarantee that the conversation will go as you have planned, right? Things may change, emotions, there might be some emotional outbursts. So there's really no way you can predict how a conversation goes, but it's always good to have some kind of a plan in place which you can follow so that, your conversation is a little more structured. And also, it's very, very important that you be clear of the issue, right? You need to make sure that you're not sugarcoating what you have to say, and you are getting straight to the heart of the matter. We've been told many a times, or we've read many of times that, when you're giving feedback, it's nice to sandwich negative feedback between positive feedback. In my opinion, I don't think it'll work in this. I don't think it'll work in this, situation, because it is best to get straight to the matter instead of beating around the bush. And when you're trying to get straight to the matter, stick to the facts. Don't let emotions guide your thoughts. Stick to the facts. State your observations. Give examples, if possible, of what you've observed. And if you think that you have in any way contributed to the problem, then you need to acknowledge that. For instance, if you think that your procrastination of discussing this topic earlier has led to complicating the issue further, you must acknowledge that. Everybody, appreciates clarity and honesty in such situations. Once you've shared your observations, it's time for you to stop talking and start listening. And you need to listen to understand the other person's point of view and not to respond and react. Very often when we are listening to people, we are already forming answers of what we want to, tell or convey back to the other person. That is probably not a good idea when you're trying to understand what the other person is trying to say and trying to reach an amicable solution to the problem at hand. So you need to think, you need to stop, listen, and then respond, not reactively, but thoughtfully. You should also give the time you should also give that person some time to absorb what you've said, right? You've given that person a lot of things to think about. You've put in your perspective. You need to give them some time to think about it, absorb what they've heard from you, and then respond. So then you need to get comfortable with silence. Sometimes you'll need to be prepared for strong emotional outbursts from that person, and you need to give them that time and space and resist the temptation to interrupt. Everybody wants to be heard and understood, and we need to respect that. It's also very important that we acknowledge what the other person is saying. You don't have to agree to everything that they're saying, but you really need to acknowledge their perspective. You need to show that what you're trying to understand what they're trying to say. Acknowledging the other person's emotions and point of view is important, as it maintains that element of respect in such conversations. If you're cold and complacent, it won't take too long for the conversation to go downhill. You also need to be very mindful of your response and reaction. Don't be impulsive. Think before you respond. Don't be defensive. If you think that the conversation is not going as per plan, or if the emotions are really high and the situation is becoming volatile, it's always okay to take a break. You can always continue the conversation or discussion at a later date or a later time when both of you feel calmer and are in control of your emotions. The intent here is to collaborate and reach an outcome that is agreeable to both of you. A learning conversation is not a battle of messages. Wrap it up amicably. Even if you haven't reached a solution, remember to genuinely thank this person for their time, because they've taken the time to come and try and have the discussion with you to solve the issue. Make sure that you reiterate what was agreed upon. Even if you agree to disagree with that person, make sure that you reiterate that. Make sure that you end the conversation on a positive note. You can their perspective with you. They've given you their point of view. You can also shift the topic to something light, probably not work related. But whatever it is, try and end the a conversation with a positive note, because it will keep the channels of communication open and you both can go back to work, on cordial terms. The bottom line here is that we must always aim to preserve the relationship. Okay, now we've discussed a lot of things. We've discussed what are difficult conversations. We've discussed why they're difficult. We've looked at best practices that we can follow. We've looked at do's and don'ts during the conversation. I want to wrap up this discussion with three key takeaways from this session today. The first one is it's absolutely important to not avoid having crucial conversations because they help define a team's work culture, and you as a manager play a very important role in defining that team culture. It is also important to approach such conversations with the right intent and mindset, because when you approach conversations with good intent and a positive mind touch, the outcomes are more often positive than not. And finally, like I said in the previous slide, we should always try to preserve the relationship. So it is important to end any difficult conversation on a positive note. That's all I had for today. You all have been great audiences. If there are any questions, I can answer them for you now.
Thanks so much, Padma. There are a couple of questions that people had posted initially. If you maybe if you can stop sharing, then you can see the chat, right? I can't hear you. Is it only me? Can you all hear Padma?
No, we cannot hear Padma.
Here, Padma.
Sorry, I was on
On
mute.
mute.
Did I just go on mute? Okay.
Yeah, in between. No problem. So if you could, can you see the chat now?
Yeah, 1 second.
Yeah, to scroll up, there are a few questions about performance appraisal, poor rating, and all of that. Right at the top.
Those were the points that we gave initially when she asked us what are the difficult conversations.
So these are particular situations. So does anyone have any questions that Padma has not covered in her presentation or in any context?
Questions, Asha, these were comments that they gave in when I asked them about examples of difficult conversation.
Yeah, sure. Yes, over to you all.
So Padma, you mentioned that it should be our intent. The first thing should be our intent for the conversation, right? That time we need to decide whether to go ahead with the conversation or to, withdraw from the conversation. Now, my dilemma is, when do we take that call?
When do we take
little tricky, yeah.
When do we take the call of whether we want to go in for the discussion or not?
Yes, because it is also highly recommended not to avoid a conversation.
Yeah, but we also need to think about, is this a conversation we really want to have? When we say we are trying to evaluate whether this conversation is necessary, I'd given some points to ponder upon, right? What is affecting you about this situation? Is it a personal issue? You feel that you are being challenged, or your authority is being challenged, or is there something else to it, right? Whether the situation in the team is being affected. That you're doing as a team. So I think that is what you'll have to look at, whether when you're thinking about having a conversation, how much of an impact will it have if you don't have the conversation versus if you have the conversation. And that is a very subjective thing, right? It all depends on how you want, what you want to happen and what is important to you at that point in time. For instance, if it is a low performer, you definitely might want to have that conversation and not postpone that conversation, right? Because that might be affecting your work, what's happening in your team. It might be affecting project deadlines. It might be affecting the morale of the other team members when they see that there is a low performer and nobody's doing anything about that person, and the rest of the team is taking on more job because this person is not able to perform optimally and what is expected of him or her. So these are all, in my opinion, something that we need to weigh and something which is subjective. And as managers, we have to have those thought processes going on and then take an informed decision on whether we need to have that conversation or not.
Thank you.
I think we
Did I
have
answer your question?
questions in chat.
Yes, Padma. Like what I understand is like we have this professional and personal constraints. So we need to see what it is affecting and then take a call there.
Yep, yep.
Padma, I think there are a couple of questions in the chat now.
Okay. Good. Just struggling to open this chat window. Can you read that out for me? I'm not able to open
So
it.
there's one question from Srinivas. Srinivas, if you're there on the call, you can unmute and ask the question.
Yeah, sure, sir. But I could do that. But I'm just afraid that my voice is echoing a bit. Am I audible clearly?
You're audible. There's no echo.
Okay, great. So let me thanks Padma for doing this very nice session, and
Thank you.
appreciate the efforts of that you've taken as well as the organizers. I just had one very generic question, but it's I think quite pertinent in this scenario. What I typed out is at times emotions run high and it is difficult to even keep calm, let alone do something constructive to resolve the issue. What should we do in these scenarios apart from counting from 1 to 100 before meeting the employee?
So that is why preparation is important, Srinivas. I know it is not easy. It's easier said than done. Even people who've had, who've been in the management side of things for a very long time find it very difficult sometimes to, contain their emotions and behave appropriately during a conversation. And that is why I emphasized on actually preparation before the conversation, how you go approach the conversation, what kind of mindset you go with, what is the intent that you go with to a conversation. But having said that, we can do as much preparation as we want, but there is no knowing how the conversation will go and what turn the conversation will take, right? So when emotions are running very high and when you are even feeling that you cannot control your emotions, like I was saying, it's good to actually take a break. It's good to say that, we're not really getting anywhere with this. We might want to start this conversation after some time or after some days when we have had time to think over what we've said to each other today, or when we are in better control of our emotions. That's perfectly all right to say, right? And then walk away rather than say something and make the situation even worse and go to a point of no return where one regret what you've done or what you've said, and there is no taking back those words, right? So at that point in time, I would sincerely suggest that, just take a break, step back, say that, we can continue this conversation a little later and then come back to the conversation. It's always good to sleep over an issue or, take some time to think about that issue before you respond impulsively to it. I want to give a small example. This was not when I was a manager, but more when I was a lead, and it was not a face-to-face conversation, it's email. Sometimes we have these conflicting conversations in email as well, and somebody had sent an email which I felt challenged my capability and my competence, just the way the email was written. And my first impulse was to just write an equally strong email back, but only thing I did is I did not hit the send button. I did not do that. It was in the evening. I just wrote the email. I wrote whatever I felt like writing in the email, and I thought I'll send it in the morning because anyway it's night. And when I got up in the morning and I read that email, I felt, oh my God, what have I written? Is this me? Sometimes when you're very emotionally charged, you don't think rationally. And when you go back and look at what you'd written, at least when I went back and looked at what I written, I felt, how could I write such a thing? This is not me. And then, I rewrote the entire email, and I, of course, conveyed the message what I had to convey, but it was very professional. It was calm, it was composed, and I felt good about it. And the next day when I met that person, I could at least look that person in the eye and have that conversation or follow up the conversation with, some decent professional discussion. So I think that's how I've approached it. We all have our ways of approaching it, but that's how I approached it. And I feel taking a break always helps.
Thank you for this, very detailed and very down to earth kind of an answer, because there is I was thinking on those lines as a solution, but you provided a lot of clarity in that. I think this approach can also be used for dealing or working with SMEs as well, not just this really helps us in improving our interpersonal skills. And I was a little bit worried. If I could ask a follow-up question about this little worry is that do you feel that there's some a bit of perception in case of any delays in dealing with the situation immediately, because then people generally jump to conclusions that, oh yeah, he's not responding to my email, or he just looked away. Because at that point of time, we're trying to kind of let things simmer down and come up with a more constructive, positive way of looking at it. Because sometimes body language also lets us know that you bump into them at the washroom, or you see them in the cafeteria with their friends, and a lot of these human emotions come into us. They are all his group friends are looking at me, and is he discussing me with his team, and why should he discuss what's on a one-on-one discussion with the teammates? And a lot of these human emotions come into play, and at that point of time, often, I'm just human, and we are all human. I'm just thinking that, if I don't deal with this situation right now, it's going to be perceived that I was at fault, or I said something inappropriate, or the employee suddenly feels that, oh, yeah, I have a one-up on my manager or my lead. So a lot of these human emotions keep playing in your head, and it kind of it helps to cloud the actual transparent thinking. So just if you could just add a little bit more tips on how to deal with that. Thank you.
So if I understand your question, you're saying that if we don't deal with the situation in a timely manner, people will take advantage of us, and we will be seen as a person who, who can be who's at fault. Are you talking from a and I'm assuming you're talking from a manager's perspective, right?
I'm actually looking at all different aspects. Like I'm actually mentoring interns as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I also conduct trainings for newbies as well as junior writers. And though I've knock on wood, I've not faced a situation where this kind of friction happens, but I thought I'll take the opportunity to be prepared in these kind of scenarios if they happen in future, how it will help us, especially when we are expected as experienced writers, or somebody, it's just a dotted line title, right? I mean, team leader, team manager, doc manager. At the end of the day, when we are grooming or working with folks with a little lesser experience than us, we are expected to mentor them and train them and groom them. And it also comes with that little bit of extra responsibility that we have, that we respond in a certain way, or we deal with any kind of request for shortcuts or things. There are a lot of difficult things that we need to tell them in a nice way, rather than telling them that no, this is not how we work in the technical writing world, or this is not how we interact with SMEs. I got a complaint from your SME saying that you were quite rude, and you had a barrage of questions. These are just examples of different things. And what is the right way to explain that to somebody who's much junior? Because you've been in that place and you feel their pain, but at the same time, you have that power of using a few words and leave a lasting impression on your junior, and letting them share that with somebody else and say, you know what, Shri told me something like this, and this is how we should deal with it. Because then you become a benchmark, you become that guiding force, and you have the power to make or break somebody's learning journey. So that's why I thought these questions really help to understand these kind of scenarios. Even if we are at, you remember you spoke about that third person, or a third,
Yeah,
a neutral person who's looking at it from an objective place. So there could be a situation where we could ourselves be in that objective place, where we're trying to mitigate two junior writers in their conflict. They'll come up to you, and only because both of them look up to you, become like a referee, and then you don't know. It's like a parenting situation, and so that is why these things really help. So thank you so much for the session. I'm sorry, guys, I've taken too much time. I'll let somebody else ask another question. But thank you so much. Have a wonderful day ahead, guys.
thank you. I just like to take a moment to answer, just try to answer what you've just in a couple of sentences answer that, and how I deal with that, right? As a manager, there are people who come up to us, team members who come up to us who have conflict with each other, right? I think you should not jump into resolving that conflict at the first go. That's my take on it, right? They're all mature adults. And if they have some issues with each other, I think you should give them a chance to resolve it amongst themselves before you become like that parenting figure and jump in and try to, solve all their problems for them. Because working with another team member is not and making sure that team members work with each other is not just the sole responsibility of a lead or a manager, right? They need to know how to work with each other, and they are mature enough to have those conversations. Only if they've had, multiple conversations and things are not going the way they need to go, that is when I think, we can intervene. And I don't think we should intervene at a drop of a hat. As soon as you see somebody's having some issues or they come with you with some complaints, we should not be jumping in. We should give them the benefit of doubt to, or we should, give them that space and time to, resolve it themselves. And the moment you step in, right, even as a lead or as a manager, then it becomes an escalation, and that takes a different, or makes the situation uglier. So that is my take on it. But at some point sometimes you'll have to intervene, and that should not happen. That should not be the first recourse you go to, and try and intervene and solve problems between two people. That's my take on it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Padma. I think someone has posted a question about layoffs, which is again probably one of the most difficult conversations.
Where is it?
Sorry, I'll read it out. What is the situation if one of the team members has been identified to be laid off and the manager has to be the messenger?
Yeah, we've all had that situation, right? Where we have had to do that at some point in time or the other. Okay, there are two ways, layoffs happen. One is this person is a poor performer. You've had discussions with that person prior, and you should have had discussions with the person prior. If the person is a poor performer, you should know about it, right? And you should have you should have had those regular conversations with that person. It should not come as a surprise to, that person shouldn't be thinking that I'm a great performer, and then one day you go and say, no, you're a poor performer and you need to be, you're going to lose your job. So this is something that as a manager, you should have had discussions with the person, and you should have given them, generally some companies put them on performance improvement plans and try to help them, try to give them that extra coaching. And if nothing else works, that's where you, have to let that person go. And it shouldn't usually come as a surprise to that person because that conversation has always been going on with that person. The second aspect to it is when there is an organizational restructuring, where it need not be that this person is actually a bad performer, but because of some project changes or some changes in the org structure, you'll have to let the person go. Now that's tough. That is really, really tough. And I think that was one of the most toughest times for me when I had to do that in my career as a manager. Of course, you do have HR coming in to help you, but you need to, and of course, you also given info, material on how to deal with those people or what to tell those people. Tell them, it was a management decision. But what I think you need to go with is a very honest approach, right? You have to be empathetic. You have to tell them the situation, and you have to be honest about it. And I can also tell you that, we had this situation once when I was a manager, and maybe because of the way I approached it or whatever it is, the next time when they had an opportunity, when I had an opportunity in my team and I asked those people to join back, they were more than happy to join back. So it is how you deal with those with those situations, how honest you are, how transparent you are, and the genuine empathy with which you approach the situations that make a lot of difference. And people do understand that sometimes there are organizational changes that happen which lead to such situations, but it's how you approach it. And of course, you get a lot of help. Situations, and again, you need to go prepared with it and be prepared to have, give them their space, be comfortable with silence, whatever I've said. That I think what the best practices that I spoke about today holds good for such situations as well. Did I answer that question?
Yes, Padma, thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thanks for this
bit of the
lovely
question.
time that you've spent answering all these questions. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, there was a last bit to the question. What is the corresponding impact it will have on the team when someone's being laid off?
Okay, it is a bad impact. But again, I said you need to be open and honest and transparent. You have to tell the situation as it is. And the team more often, team mostly understands it. It's happened. Like I said, I've had to lay off some people in my team at some point in my career. And the way we approached it, way we helped the team members out, way we conveyed the message to them, all of them mattered. And like I said, when there was an opening available, and many of these people were laid off not because of performance issue, but because there were, we had those people come back. And so the rest of the team also realized that we meant what we said. It was not just, we were not just saying things for the sake of saying things. We really meant when we said that, this is the situation now, we have to let you go. But later on, if there is an opportunity, we'll definitely like to see you back. And we did that. We did that when we had an opportunity. So that builds trust in the team that, we have a manager who has our back.
Thanks, Padma. Sharath will just share, we'll get back to the questions, there's some more, but Sharath will share a feedback form. I'd request all of you to please fill up because it helps us, improve our sessions going forward. The next question, Padma, from Santosh is, how to deal with the situations when the other person does not agree to our conversations, even when presented with rational data?
Okay, this can happen, right? You will present data, that person is going to refute. That is their way of defending the situation. So I would say that, there's only so much you can push a person. You've said your point of view, you've presented the data, you have all the facts in place. But if that person refuses to agree or decides not to agree, you just agree to disagree and move on. How long can you pull it? How long can you continue pushing this issue? At some point, we need to, take a break and say that, okay, this is how it is. But whatever it is, the fact that you've broached the topic will definitely make that person cautious and, think about the next actions, and maybe that they may not repeat the same actions again. So fact that you've brought this topic up itself is a good start. Whether they agree to it, whether they push back, whether they, disagree with you, all of that aside, if you've gone with facts, they also know that these facts are right. They need not agree. It depends on a person's individual personality to whether agree or not. There is, like somebody was saying earlier, there are so many emotions at play. Your ego is at play, your competency is at play, your reputation is at play. So it's not going to be easy for people to agree to everything that you put on the table. But the fact that you've broached the topic, you've brought it out, at least gives us the feeling that we have addressed this issue the best as we can, and they will know that this is not something they can continue doing with you. So that's all that we can do. We cannot do anything more than that.
Thanks, Padma. This is one additional aspect I'd like to bring, which would be great if you can share your points about. So one of the mistakes I think I made in my earlier stages of my career is to feel that I have to handle this completely alone. The fact that I could reach out for help, apart obviously from my own manager with whom I would have discussed it, I always felt, I never realized that I could actually reach out to HR for help. When should I reach out for help? I wasn't sure about that. There's also the situation where there is a mental health issue involved, where you have to be really careful. Some of us have people in other countries. The laws in different countries are different. In some places, you have to bring in HR even earlier because of potential employees suing the company. Some countries are very sensitive to that and all of that, right? So there are areas where you do need to ask for help. How does a junior manager decide when that time has come?
So in my opinion, Asha, I think anything that is to deal with policies, especially HR policies, or it could be things about inclusivity or any of these things, right? Where there is policy compliance or compliance issues, I generally involve the manager. Generally doubts. If there are issues with which is related to performance or things like that, most of the times you are well equipped to handle it. I think when it comes to policy, where people are flouting policies, or where like you said, things are different in different countries, and you're not very sure how to handle them, I think you can use the HR's help. Actually, you can use the HR's help whenever you feel that you're not competent enough, or I wouldn't say competent, when you're not comfortable enough to handle a situation, and that going into this discussion is quite challenging, I think you can involve the HR, because they are there to help you. It is their role to help you there. It's their jobs to help you there. So I don't think, as a new manager, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to HR. I do it even now when I have some questions. In fact, we have regular open office hours with HR folks on a monthly basis, where we can go and discuss anything, right? So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be involving the HR. If we need help, we need help, and we shouldn't shy away from asking that help. And especially with policy-related issues.
Thanks, Padma. It is especially when the employee is aggressive, or where you feel that you have had previous conversations and the person got vindictive, or you feel they're trying to manipulate you. And like I said, the mental health angle coming in, right? There are situations where you think there's a problem here, but you're not a doctor, you can't figure out.
Yeah.
So the HR has the advantage of having dealt with situations like this many times. So they have the experience and they can give you a professional opinion on how you should get the conversation going. So there will be particular situations where they might tell you, don't have the conversation without an HR person in the room, because they know that this is a borderline situation which could go either way. It is also, you must remember that you also need your protection, right? That there could be situations, I mean, hopefully it won't happen to anyone, but where the employee goes out and then is vindictive towards the manager or to the company or whatever, right? So it's always good to get professional advice if you feel it is a situation which could go really bad. So don't hesitate.
Yeah, and difficult conversations are difficult because of these factors, right? And I don't think we should ever shy away from asking any help, whether it is to our managers or to the HR. If we feel we are not confident to handle the situation, there's no harm asking for help. Nobody's going to judge you on that. Definitely not the HR folks.
Yes, and this is also the reason why we are also launching the mentoring program. And one of the reasons why we thought about this is very often we tend to struggle with things alone, whereas talking to a more senior person who's made that journey before, right? It will really help you get clarity as to, okay, how do I go better prepared for this conversation? Just running it past a mentor will make a big difference to you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Any questions? Please, you can put on the mic and talk. Or if you want to share something, which you resonated very much with.
Hi, Padma. Shruti here.
Hi, Shruti.
Thank you for the wonderful session. Really an eye-opener on many levels. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, my question is that usually we have this conversation between peers, or even with someone who reports to us, etc. But then what happens if we want to have one such conversation, say with a manager or a super boss? Yeah, that's really my question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. When you need to have those difficult conversations with your managers, and it's even more worrisome because you feel that there'll be retaliation, there'll be repercussions of saying something to the manager that they're not happy to hear. But I believe whatever what the things that I've said in my session today, most of them would apply even if it is that you're talking with the manager. You need to think whether this is a topic that you want to broach with the manager. You definitely need to prepare. You need to have your facts right and your intent, tone, and mindset right, and go with go and have that conversation with your manager. And generally when you go with facts, things don't go that bad unless the manager is absolutely unreasonable, which I believe most managers are quite reasonable. So it's a challenging thing to manage upwards. It could be anything, right? That you are having a problem with the manager, or you want to convey your team's problems to the manager, or there is a specific issue with the manager. But I believe that these whatever I've shared today should help you even have that conversation with the manager, and you should be able to deal with that situation.
Thank you. Thank you for answering it.
And this is also, I think, from my experience, having a mentor helps, because a mentor is usually somebody who's probably at the level of your manager, and you're running past that situation, run the situation past and see, am I seeing it objectively? Is there a way in which I can, put this forward? So basically practicing that with someone more experienced, that has hugely helped me.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good point, Asha. Practicing before you go, right? Because you need to get the you need to set the right tone, and you need to speak in the right way to make sure that you're not offending, especially if it is your man. No, you shouldn't offend anybody, but it becomes trickier when it is your manager.
Yep, and I think very often what what makes for an uncomfortable conversation is when you did not anticipate a particular response. And when you talk to a more experienced person who's been through this before, when you rehearse it or when you practice it with them, they'll respond, say, what if this person responded in this way? This is one way in which they could respond. Yeah. And sometimes we get so obsessed with our question, we're not able to anticipate all the possible scenarios. And a third person can tell you, okay, this could be, what if they responded in this way? What would your response be? So your rehearsal is much better because you've covered more scenarios.
That's true.
Just would like to add, this is Aparna here. Padma, thanks for that very insightful presentation. I just want to add something from whatever I have experienced in my current organization. I feel that the environment and the workplace culture that is there in your company plays a very big role when it comes to the kind of situations or the kind of conversations that you need to handle. And really what I've learned from my current company is that any conversation can be held in a very chilled out, cool manner. And as far as emotions are concerned, I have learned a lot about how they can be kept in check, and it's all about the environment we create. An environment is created by individuals. Managers and leads are more influential, so they kind of set the environment even for people who are coming in, and it just does play a very important role to create an environment where people can have conversations without getting too emotional and without having your personal ideas or thoughts in play, and look at it more in a professional manner. Just wanted to add that was something which very significantly I learned in my current organization.
Yeah, thank you, Aparna. That's quite, yeah, that's a good comment. It totally depends on the organization also that you work with. Anything else?
Yeah, if no more questions, then we can stop it. I know it's 11 o'clock right now. So thank you so much, Padma. That was really, and I think very good points. And the slides and the recording will be available on the MTD site. Sharat will be sharing that. So I'm sure many of us will go back and refer those, because the slides are really, really well prepared. So thanks very much. And thanks all of you who have joined. In case you have any further doubts, you can reach out to Padma on LinkedIn. And really looking forward to hearing from you all in future sessions too. And thanks,
Thank you so much.
for hosting.
Thank you so much, Asha. Thanks, Sharat. And thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.